Moving forward, we are starting with an interesting panel discussion on future-proofing the logistics and supply chain industry with advanced maps and deep tech. To tell us more, let us introduce to you our esteemed panelists for the session. Mr. Dipan Mehta, LogiNext, Mr. Nitish Rai, Freightfox, Mr. Rahul Vishwakarma, Get Crest. And to moderate this session, we would like to call upon Mr. Rajkiran Kanagala. Uh, Thank you. I would now hand the proceeding to Mr. Rajkiran, sir. Thank you.
So thank you first and foremost, few members, but we thank that you are all there. So there's somebody to listen to us. Thank you. So it's going to be more like a sort of a brainstorming session. But anyways, let's start. So we've got a great panel. So we got absolute, what in terms of knowledge, somebody who's working in LogiNext, somebody who's in Freightfox, and now Rahul has started a new company a year ago, primarily doing digitization of entire supply chains. He's got some good use cases. And of course, I come from a stable legacy company, so we have got a good debate out here. So to start, I'll just tell some statistics in terms of the theme. So the theme is future-proofing the logistics and supply chain industry with advanced maps and deep tech. So what we did is that we looked out at the cost of getting an API. What is the cost? Means how much you pay to Google or anybody. So to set the context, Google Place API per hit is 23 paise and Direction API per hit is 50 paise. That means whenever you get a ping from Google, you pay 23 and 50 paise. TomTom, which is an alternate and coming up, it's free for 5,000 hits per day, but paid is 0.04 paise and Direction API is 0.60 paise. Though TomTom is free at a larger level, you still end up paying. And the government APIs, Vahan, Sarthi, FOIS, it's pretty steep. It's 80 paise to a rupee. They are yet to confirm that. And for a private vendor, it's as high as ₹3 per hit. So in short, there's a payout which is going to be pretty steep for anybody trying to develop any application over maps based API in. So the first question now I would ask Dipan. So Dipan, just a second. Is you do a lot of work for a lot of B2B, D2C, B2C companies. Do you think whatever offering you are making is affordable for MSME? So the question is, will MSME come to you while you are doing a lot of good work around the digitization? So that's the first question for you.
Okay, so just to give us a small background about how LogiNext tries to evolve and see the future, not to really speak about LogiNext, but just to give a problem in the context. What we have over time observed, okay, that one of the biggest impact that we create, and specifically we have customers across 4 continents, biggest value proposition is essentially about the intelligence around the data, right? So the cost statistics that you shared, yes, it's sometimes just remains on our head that, okay, how do I make it more affordable and stuff? And of course, as volumes grow, some of those costs do come down. What the platform allows, however, is make the most beneficial use out of that cost, and hence you will actually start seeing an upward benefit in terms of your eventual sort of usage, eventual sort of efficiencies, eventual margins, as you call it, or your efficacy in which you will actually able to monetize available opportunities, right? That is what the platform actually brings us. So while, yes, the cost is the thing, the cost of map itself is something which is actually not controllable because there are only few players. And the way we see maps is not merely just a location and distances, but having that intelligence data around what we can do with it, and which is where, as our platform actually gives much more effective, beneficial value out of smart. That's how we sort of see it.
Thanks, Dipan. So one of the point you mentioned was, or you are putting a challenge that as volumes grow, the cost is going to come down, and you are looking at a might be cost of ownership rather than absolute cost. So we leave there, but I have a question now for Nitish. Nitish, we have been in panels together earlier. I think I could not really be on this side. But Freightfox, you could tell the audience what you do, but also a direct question for you. For me, you are a black buck. So how do you counter that? And restricting then to the theme, you can tell us how is the theme fitting your organization, like what you are doing in the entire GIS space.
Sure. So yeah, just to give a brief on what we do is, so Freightfox basically is a end-to-end enterprise logistics platform wherein the large manufacturing organizations can do procurement, management, visibility, and all sort of analytics and everything for their decision making which is required. So we are basically a technology platform, a data platform built for manufacturing organization. That's the focus. Number two is a very, very interesting question, and this is not only asked by the panel, but or when we meet people, but also by investors a lot. So every ecosystem has got two sides basically. One is a supply side of the ecosystem, wherein we supply the freight capacities, and there is a demand side of the ecosystem which consume those capacities and used to move their goods basically. So Blackbuck basically as a company operates on the supply side of the ecosystem, where they try to organize the highly fragmented trucking industry. Basically the fleet owners, they attempted to create a system where the broker networks can be bypassed basically, and thereby creating efficiencies in terms of load availability, utilization. So their focus was basically the fleet owners and what all services they would require, then they would do. On the other hand, if you look at Freightfox, we are a demand-centric platform. So our customers are manufacturing companies, the large manufacturing companies. And how do they plan their contract logistics for a year? How would they budget for it? How would they do scenario analysis based on the market intelligence which is required to be done? How would they conduct their day-to-day operations in terms of placing the indents and getting the trucks which they need and getting a visibility end-to-end on the platform? So that is basically our value proposition to the manufacturing industry which is there. So the basic difference is, in fact, just to share with you, Blackbuck is on our platform supplying the capacities to our customers right now. So that's the key difference, and that's how we operate in this ecosystem. The third part, very quickly covering, I believe that as a human being, we understand anything the best if we sense it the way it is. And that is the core, the geospatial analytics. And even if I today have to display an image or analytics here, imagine if I display a histogram versus imagine I display a chart of India showing the graph on the 3D view. You can imagine yourself that where you feel more connected to. And that is where we believe that all the analytics can actually be put to right use if it is sensed with the external data and the physical ecosystem, which is possible only via geospatial or GIS-based integrations with the internal data and the layering which we can do. So that is where we also play our role. We very strongly use the geospatial analytics in terms of identifying the supply-demand gaps, identifying the freight flows within the ecosystem which is happening, so on and so forth.
Thanks, Nitish. Rahul, this is your second company, is what you have told us. So you're giving us a lot of complex. You think differently than what we. So in terms of the topic, which is more of, in layman's language, using maps for any effective work or any effective activity, what is your thought as a startup? And B, what does your company precisely do? And do you think this is something which you're going to incorporate in your product or service offering?
Sure. Thank you so much, Raj. So guys, my name is Rahul. I'm the co-founder here at Crest. We help SMEs in automating their supply chain on the demand side to supply side by helping them identify what to order, when to order, how much to stock, and where to put. Now, to answer your question, right, especially either maps or at the end, the motto is to put the goods where it should be, right? Identifying that in advance and putting it where it should be. Definitely with the vision of digitizing the supply chain for the SMEs, using maps and using the GIS data is something that we have in our roadmap as well. In terms of identifying where to put, how do you identify the right location? How do you place your CFAs correctly? How do you place your warehouses correctly? Be it to kind of position for your growing quick commerce or your e-commerce, your D2C, or in coming months and years, explosion of GT and MT as well, right? To be able to improve the SLA from, let's say today, if it takes 4 days, 5 days on an average to deliver good across SME Janta, it should come down to 12 hours.
That's, I think, quite an interesting target you have taken, 12 hours. So we wish you the best on that. Now coming back to Dipan and sticking to the theme. See, end of the day, if you see, we are dependent on international players to give us the core input in terms of a map. We are doing a lot in SATCOM. I think Indian ISRO is a great example. The kind of work happening. Where do you think this will converge? That is, eventually, can we get this platform free? So can you stick your neck out and say, I'm not going to pay this high amount per hit, irrespective of the volumes you are saying, because Rahul is saying that he's going to do something for MSME, they will never have volumes. So how will you come across to address this problem?
Okay. So in general, I'm optimistic for things. Okay. If you just look at it, last 2 decades, where I've built most of my career, India has always caught up as far as technology game is concerned, right? I think there was times when everything was much more, internet was much more accessible in the West, but in India you had dial-ups, right? But we've seen those days. So India has always been fast catching up on things where we see value, right? So as far as if we see value in maps, we see that, okay, fine, the maps is one of the core object which would actually have a huge cost effectiveness or in terms of essentiality of the operations. Obviously, I'm sure the industry conscious together will try and do something. The most important thing I feel is that map, unlike the typical software development, is a massive in terms of ownership, a massive in terms of infrastructure being one part of it, but massive in terms of actually collecting, gathering, and organizing information. So what really happens is that if everyone tries to do their own thing, right? If I try to create my own system, and then there are a dozen other vendors who are trying to just compete against each other, all of this will essentially turn out to be a superficial copy of each other, or superficial sort of a minor this thing is. These are the kind of infrastructure which should be more collaborative, where we should focus on synergy rather than specific competitive advantage. And that synergy will actually outweigh the benefits over individually, okay, my map has something better than your map and stuff like this, right? So I don't think another dozen player can come out in the market. Traditionally, most other markets have this thing that, okay, the moment you have 12 players producing some electronic gadgets, then it becomes very cheap, right? So the moment you have 12 brands producing headphones, then the whole market just becomes much cheaper. But the infrastructure, things like this maps and stuff, it won't benefit if there are 12 competing companies trying to do the same thing, right? Instead, you would probably have some consortium, some sort of this thing, and I think IAMAI is a good platform to pitch in there, that there should be an industry-wide effort where we forget our individual differences and then say, this is a platform which everyone help us to get there. I don't really have upfront answers to how that can be, but ULIP is one of those sort of an effort where probably they might sort of solve this problem. Reason why I'm emphasizing on collaboration over competition, right, is because maps are ever changing, right? Over these years, I've seen every time I've been commuting to my office, there's some new flower coming up. Right now, it's like every time you see the buildings are replaced by somewhere else. If you really ever see map, it's not one static place. That, okay, once I gather all my information, and now we talk about traffic, which is always crazy. Any city you go, I think the Bangalores and Bombay people keep sort of debating whose traffic is better, but you'll never have a real-time data. You never have real closest to yesterday sort of accuracy in any of this map. So any such efforts has to be lot more driven by synergy. And that's also tie up to the point that I said. Maybe the government is some one entity who could probably drive it, but if the government itself becomes one player, it will there. So one of the examples that we have UPI, for example. UPI is a success because of the model that they have brought in, but at the same time, UPI is a success not because government is doing everything else. All fintech companies, all banks are party to this thing. If it was one more isolated wallet, it would have just failed just like anything else. But because there is a unification, everyone wins, right? So I think if you have to have a map which is meant for India, you will see a lot of map where you will have a very detailed information about tourism countries like Singapore or in the West and stuff. Whereas in India, you will probably have much less accurate information in the same sort of maps, right? And you will find that adding information, validating information, course correcting information over time is a massive effort, right? And of course, there has to be technology itself to be used on how maps keeps getting updated. But that sort of collaboration is core tech, as well as it has to be sort of industry-wide effort, is my view.
Dipan, is LogiNext doing something here as a company to give any service to clients?
So we don't provide maps as a service, but we have extensive use. So the way we think of map is actually no longer about where things are, okay? So you say, these are the place where, this is the lat long where this is the place, this is the place, this is the place. This is fine, this is the traditional view of the map, right? But if you see maps, is information overlaid over Earth, which means that, like for example, this is not part of what we do, but like suppose you want to visualize, how COVID is spreading, right? It was there super severe in one state and then suddenly it moves to another state and stuff. If you really try to understand, any people put temperatures over the years over the map, right? It gives you an understanding of how the data is flowing. So maps is fundamentally information over lat long. And so use lat long as a scale, x and y variable, as opposed to actually the thing itself, right? So a lot of intelligence then can be built if information by lat long is available in a unified way. So I can have my own codified sort of my own generated information, but I can have a platform which allows everyone to have a equally playing field. That's the idea.
Sure. Thanks, Dipan. So you mentioned about unified. So coming to you, Nitish, and that's nothing but in my mind it's ULIP. So do you think ULIP is the answer when you're looking at a deep tech situation, a low cost or no cost scenario, a scenario where you can do your entire network optimization on a universal platform, and even MSME can do something, or even Rahul's company can pick up something from there. Do you think that's the future or that's the present? How do you see that panning out?
So ULIP is a very interesting framework, I would say, which is brought on from the government side. For the first time, almost over 29 or 30 ministries, I'm not sure of the number, but it is 29 or 30 ministries which came together to publish their data over APIs on a single interface. Now, that data basically is immensely powerful, and ULIP, Unified Logistics Interface Platform, according to my own perspective, is is one of the best recipes for innovation which is provided by the government and the way it is provided today. There is a benefit and an advantage for everybody in it. So whether it's a large organization, whether it's a technology player like Rahul, us or LogiNext, whether it is a conventional large player like TCI, whether it is a MSME or whether it is an individual business owner or even a fleet owner. So everybody has something or some takeaway from this particular profile which is there. When we look at ULIP, it helps us ascertain that imagine a QSR, for example, what Rahul is servicing, or probably a small business owner who's placing 2 trucks, 1 truck, 3 trucks, and now they cannot have GPS integration. The truck is coming from the market; they would not have the visibility. On the ULIP platform, the same business owner can just log in, put the truck number, and actually can get not as granular as what GPS would give, but still, what is the last location available on the FASTag network, for example. Now, these are the kind of small enablements which are giving the power of visibility, not at an extent of GPS, but to some extent, but at very lower cost to the MSMEs also. For the large organization, on the other hand, it is a much broader phenomena where they can actually do the network optimization in terms of, for example, if you want to understand the freight flows in the ecosystem or the environment where our plant is operating. Now, what kind of truck or what type of truck which I am looking for, how much of that capacity is flowing in, how much that capacity is flowing out, would give us some idea, some sense of whether when to operate, when there is a shortage, how to plan for things, and so on and so forth there. Also, when we look at ULIP as a platform, it has got a similar potential, as you said. We are referring to UPI, the payment system. It is an example, basically, also for the globe, that how a complex country like India, with such a high fragmentation on the transportation ecosystem, can actually create this framework and leverage value out of it. Government has also, what has done is that for the larger organization which can afford the APIs and the cost of it, they are actually buying that API, which you said still to rationalize. The cost is still high, according to me also. But when we look at the government packaging it under one solution and not giving APIs, but giving that solution to MSME, that is very, very affordable and powerful for MSME customers specifically.
Thanks,
if I
Nitish.
can chip
Yeah,
in,
please.
if I can chip in something there. What you're saying, Nitish, is something absolutely correct. Adding to it, like an infrastructure like Unilever, which was able to kind of cater to tier 3 towns, villages, northeast especially, right? You still find a Dove soap available everywhere, right? That kind of infrastructure can be enabled with ULIP and government-enabled technologies itself. So especially with the advent of technologies, not just, I mean, in maps, but also connecting the country, digitizing that country itself, will really improve, again, the livelihood of and the experience of consumer, the growing consumer as well in the country.
Thanks, Rahul. So just for the house here, you should all check out on ULIP. So TCI is already signatory of ULIP. The agreement is non-negotiable. You can't make any changes to the agreement with government. You can't negotiate with government, as they say. Else, it's a great platform. And I'm not promoting anything here, but the point is that is the present and future. That if you don't become member of ULIP, it's like if I ask a question, who doesn't have digital payment app? Is there anybody? यानी किसी के पास है कि Paytm नहीं है, Google Pay नहीं है या Bheem? It's not going to be. That's what ULIP has to do for all of us, whether in a B2C scenario or a B2B. More plays on a B2B basis, but that's what you are going to face. And do tell you, wherever you're working or in your networks, the power of ULIP. That's what we would like to leave the audience with this thought. So coming to you, Rahul, if you go to any international location that is developed, Europe, US, Singapore, Canada, any place, you don't get lost. The maps work wonderfully. The taxi driver or the cab driver knows the place and you don't say much. The addresses are very short. You don't say opposite Sham Mandir or Sham Road or all those things don't go. So the backup or the background needs the map, is the efficacy of the map or the accuracy of the map. Where do you see that going out, and do you think you will be able to address it?
So, first of all, definitely not. At Crest, we are not getting into that, at least not right now. Second, India is a very different country, right? Given, for example, how the entire country developed, especially in the use of PIN codes, right? For example, take the example of UK, right? The address is nothing but literally a 6-digit PIN code and nothing else, right? It really tells the street, the area, city, and everything else in that, right? However, given, for example, how UPI and how other infrastructure has played out, India will have a unique solution of itself, right? It will definitely not be what Europe was. Europe was planned differently. It's basically how the urban planning was done there versus how the India and Indian cities are evolving, right? Because of the pace of development, right? What, let's say, nations achieved in 100 years or so, India is achieving that in 20 years.
There's something I want to add here, and this is a very pertinent, important battle that LogiNext has actually sort of been through. So I'll actually speak more about the problem that you have spoken more than just the solution about it. But if you realize, a lot of times we come across this address and say, okay, this address doesn't make sense fully, right? I mean, there's either the road is there, or we misinterpret some colony by the similar naming colony somewhere else and stuff like this, right? And then your delivery addresses would, delivery routing and all would come for a toss. We have had, so LogiNext is operating for 8 years now. And in the early days when we were sort of working on some of these class of problems, there has been massive amount of issues, and not just in India, by the way, even in US back then, right? And in Southeast Asia. This was humongous problem. What seems to be like a trivial, stupid, problem, that okay, fine, you missed out, you went to this building as opposed to this building. But there are delivery associates who deliver 100 parcels in a day, and there are 3 addresses which are actually completely contradictory. And they know personally because they have been visiting this place, but your algorithm actually puts into the route thinking that this is that long. That actually creates a havoc in the work schedule of tremendous number of drivers, right? Now this is a side effect of a tech glitch or an insufficiency of tech data that you may not really have a complete emphasis on. And then we have worked on our own internal layer of information based on what we think. And that, so one of the things that I wanted to highlight on this is that there's a lot of organized way in which your Western societies ever worked. So whenever they said, okay, let's digitize, it was straightforward for them because they've been top down in their very nature. India is a very, very bottom up country by design, right? So what works there is not necessarily how it's going to work here. But the fact is that the way to build this now is that take this actually as a bigger tech challenge itself, right? So what works in a systematic way in US, let's say, because everything, all streets are perpendicular, and you just tell me the number, I'll get there straight away. It will not work here. So you actually employ a lot of machine learning, a lot of algorithms to predict that if I tell you Borivali LBS Road, it's actually wrong. If I tell you a street name which is in Gurgaon, but tell you Chandni Chowk, that's wrong, right? Because we actually still have enough data to actually predict this through machine learning, but we know that on the map it shows wrong, right? So there are a lot of algorithmic works that we have done actually to make the same geocoding data a lot more efficient. That's one of the avenues for creating great new sort of tech around this. And the tech is the only way to actually solve such problems. You can't just say, okay, no, if only I had somebody sitting and punching great data, then my life would be set. That's actually probably not going to be sufficient.
Can I add to this? So when you say, especially let's say US or any developed economy, it was a top-down. What you mentioned correctly, that of course tech adoption. See, right now, if you see, UPI is one such technology which received adoption across the country from every nook and corner, right? You know, that technology alone can actually act as, let's say, a surrogate or a proxy to map out the entire nation and how the traffic, at least in moving the goods around, even if it's hyperlocal, intracity, intercity, right? That technology alone can be used to really track this. And by the way, there are companies doing this thing as well, using UPI data or GST data to really map out the traffic of goods being flown around as well. So there are many surrogates that can be used to again develop a layer on top of that. That is what probably Nandan Nilekani really thought when he was developing Aadhaar, that there is layer upon layer to really build the infrastructure that India needs to really evolve for next 50 years.
No, absolutely. I think some good points. But just to share with the audience, one of the success for UPI has been there's no cost of transaction. So that's the big piece. So while we are saying India is different, India will not pay. So we have to remember that. So we need to work out, and I think LogiNext, Freightfox, and even Crest can work out the solutions around this. On a lighter note, just to tell the house the problem. So I live in a building or a tower named 14A, and there's another tower 14. So why they don't want 13 to be there in the society? There's no 13th floor. While I stay, actually, there's a 13th floor in the building. They'll call it 14. So now you can imagine. So I ordered something from Big Basket. The guy delivered, but it not to my building or my floor. He delivered to 14. And those people took those goods. Might be they like the goods or something special in that. So when I asked, he said, I missed the A in the reading. So the challenge is the data is punched. The data is digitized. The address is correct. The buildings are next to each other. Everything is right. But the A makes a difference. And this is the challenge we are going to face in India. So it's a big challenge, but a great opportunity for everyone to actually monetize it. So that's what every business, irrespective which business, a physical business or a digital business, whether you are into logistics or into goods, you have this as a real, sort of a data point to monetize. But that's going to be a competitive advantage. How will you know your customer eventually when going to deliver any service? So that's what I believe is one of the big takeaways. So we have only 10 minutes. We will try and wrap it up quickly, but just to summarize, we looked at the cost of acquisition or getting an API in. It's pretty high. We are looking at an optimistic viewpoint where things, they are saying that it's going to, coming down by volume. We looked at solutions from an entire supply chain perspective till the fulfillment. And we also looked at the way ULIP is going to come about. Anybody has a question here or any point, comment, please feel free. And we can utilize the 5-7 minutes we have. Anybody? Yeah, please. Can we have a mic there?
The question is for Rahul. Rahul, can you just
Yes.
explain what your company does and its...
Sure. So we basically help you do demand forecast and then identify based on seasonalities, trends and everything else, where should you be keeping your inventory, be it in your warehouse across the country, or how should you be distributing your goods across your retailers, distributors, e-commerce partner, whatever is it, and then match it to your supply side and identify how should you be planning for your procurement, picking the right vendor, and together helping you bring down your cost of working capital, or let's say working capital in itself.
So basically demand forecasting, supply
That's correct.
handling, as well as the goods.
The procurement planning, that's right. Yeah.
Good, very good.
Anybody else? Yeah, please.
Maybe you can a bit more elaborate on this. I mean, how you actually do it, if it is okay with you. I mean, you do it through some softwares?
No, absolutely. So, sure, absolutely. So, it took us roughly 4 years to really develop demand forecasting technology itself, which is basically taking promotions data, It takes seasonality, identifies seasonality itself, prices, and all of this alone. Runs through hundreds of thousands of algorithms, and then it identifies what is the forecast going to be. It also identifies how the forecast is going to be inaccurate or accurate. Basis that, we have developed a multi-echelon inventory optimization engine, sort of a hub and spoke with a floating mother warehouse, right? Where we then identify how each and every warehouse will be varying across a cycle, and then we identify that inventory requirement. This is an engine which is used on both the supply side and the demand side. We have, so just to kind of point out a use case, we have helped a QSR in improving their fill rate, which is basically availability, by almost took it up from 55% to 96% within 4 months, automated that entire supply chain within 4 months of implementation itself. And something similar in FMCG space as well. Hope I answered it.
Anybody else? Any question, comment? Yeah. So thanks. I think we can have one final, a prediction, if we can. So the prediction has to be on the topic, on the way you see this entire panning out. So the question is how many years and free or paid? So I will start with you, Dipan. So how many years you see we're going to more or less lick this problem, and is it going to be free or paid? And third point, who will do it? Private, enterprise or government? And it has to be one word answer, no explanation, just the answer.
That's a very difficult question to answer. I mean, more in terms of future gazing. I think free or paid is just a way we actually look at the monetization part of it, but I think it would be more focused it will only happen through synergy. So
Dipan,
it will only happen,
there's nobody, the audience is few members. You please stick your neck out.
Correct.
Free, paid.
So yes, if it is synergy, it will be like a free thing. Okay, eventually we will get there.
Rahul is not liking it. Rahul is saying, you guys take, we've got a reputation to maintain. Free or paid?
Free.
Government or private?
Joint venture.
How many years?
Less than a decade.
Less than a decade. Nitish?
Cost of not paying is very expensive actually, so it will be paid definitely.
Paid, okay.
And it will be a public-private partnership for sure.
Okay.
And I believe it will happen around 2025 for sure.
Oh, you are taking a bet 2 years. Wow, that's great. Rahul?
I think it should be, again, free for end consumer, paid by parties. I agree with public-private, and I also agree with 2025.
Okay, great. I think that's what, yeah, please.
I am aware that there were multiple players in the mapping space from India. In Delhi, there was a Sardarji who ran a business. He has not been on my Facebook feed line for a long time. I don't know what is the status now. But he was there. He did good job in that space.
See, today Map My India, which got listed, is doing quite well. See, the whole issue out here is whether you're building an application or you're doing the core platform or the core service. Why we all choose Google Maps is because they are core and everything rests on it. So that's why Map My India brought in parallelly, and that's where government eventually will use a satellite communication technology and the way the SATs will play out. India, I think Dipan also mentioned, and everybody is very positive, India will change the game. End of the day, as a country, we're not going to pay for that service. We're not used to paying for UPI. We'll not pay for this. But somebody has to pay. So that's what Rahul is mentioning. Somebody will pay for it. So I think lots happening in this space. Please do look out everywhere. There's lots happening.
Sorry, just to add quickly. Any platform or core technology, the biggest enemy and the biggest friend is utilization. The problem with the platforms in India is that we ourselves are not utilizing it. If we have to open, almost 99% of us would open Google Maps, not Map My India. So if there is not enough data getting fed to that system, it will not generate the same impact. So whether we want to call it nationalistic or anything else, But if we want to really democratize it from the global companies, what we ought to do is we have to look at the options, we have to feed it with the data so that the utilization will become the best friend of that platform, and so they will become the best friend of ours.
I'll just add
Because
one.
Android is there, the data automatically goes out, right? Until and unless you specify that Maps will not send out data until and unless I open Maps. Maps automatically sends out data.
I'll just add one simple point, So anyone who, when we think of maps, no, we inherently think of Google Maps, and then that's about it. Anyone who actually tries to replicate Google Maps is bound to be under a shadow, right? And that's probably is a game which will not. If you want to say, see, Facebook grew under the nose of Google, right? But it's now as big as that because they had a separate field altogether. If you create a system where you could monetize spatial data in your own way, which Google doesn't want to really get into, you will become another map company. And you will become a great map company who does something better and different from Google Maps. That would be your future. And that would actually solve a lot of other problems which then today Google Map is not able to do. That is how it will always come out of it. If you try to say, let me have my own Google Maps, it is possibly, at least economically, not sort of a useful thought.
So thanks. Just to end with an anecdote is simple. I heard a conversation of a mother and a kid going in their car and trying to find a location. So after some time there was no network. Network nahi tha phone pe. There was a panic. So the kid said, "How are you going to reach? I don't think we're going to reach anywhere." Because the kid has been bred on only Google Maps. So this is what is the present, and that's what's going to be the future, that we will not know anything else but to use a map to reach anywhere. And the conventional wisdom of remembering a road or a route may no longer last. I think that's what the reality is in terms of maps and the deep tech. We all have to grow up to it. The kids will rule the roost in terms of establishing what kind of maps or which company will actually eventually give us the service. With this, thanks a lot for all of you to join. It's been pleasure, and thank you Dipan, Nitish and Rahul. Great knowing you, and look forward to a good engagement again. And thank you once again. Thanks for joining in. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all of you to be participating in here.
I would like to thank all the esteemed panelists and the moderator for their participation in today's session. Before we begin with our next panel, I would like to thank our associate partner Google Ad, MessageBird, growth partner Paytm Ads, lanyard partner Kalera, conversation media partner Bobble AI, agenda partner Disney Plus Hotstar. My request to you, the panelists, if we can take a good photo.